All right. And since we do have so many questions to get to, I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's go ahead and get this started. I've got two amazing panelists who are joining me here tonight. I had the opportunity to see both of them back in May, which was really exciting. And now look at here we are a couple months later, and we're all coming together in community yet again. So I'll go ahead and let Jenni and Andy both introduce themselves. Jenni, did you want to go ahead and start with you and tell us a little bit more about Feast?
Sure. Thank you so much, Jason. It was really good to see you in person. So I'm glad I got that opportunity. I am Jenny Gaines, and I am the Director of Programs and Services at Feast. And I'm not sure whether or not you're familiar with Feast, but if you're a caregiver and you're here, I really want to let you know about us. We're a global community of caregivers, mostly parents who have been on a journey with our child with an eating disorder. We understand what anyone who is experiencing it now is going through. We offer educational programs and peer support programs, and that's where ANAD comes in. I am lucky enough to be a part of a collaboration between Feast and ANAD where we offer caregiver support groups and sibling support groups. We have two caregiver support groups weekly and one sibling support group weekly. And those are facilitated and co-facilitated by trained volunteers who have been on this journey and have a lot of wisdom and insight and support to offer. And the very best part about it for me is seeing how much support the participants in the groups give each other. And you can learn so much from each other in those groups. So if you are looking for support among people who understand and you want a community, I really recommend you try either on the Feast website or the ANAD website to register and try one of our caregiver support groups.
Yes, thank you. I'm very excited that we're able to offer those. That has been such a great addition to our community, and we're so grateful for all the work that you're doing over at Feast. And we're so glad to have you as a community partner so that we get to do these types of events all the time. Andy, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Love to. Yeah. My name's Andy Willis. I'm here primarily as a parent of a child who's gone through having anorexia. We're 10 years into that journey at this point. And so I think I said to Jason when I met him at the ICE conference a few months ago that I feel like I could probably give more back, and having gone through these experiences myself, that I'd like to be able to share whatever wisdom I might have coming out the other end of that, or just help people with whatever questions they do have. Career wise, I'm sort of 30 years plus as a software developer originally, and a software executive more recently over the last several years. But I've recently left all of that and founded my own company, which is really focused on building software to help people with eating disorders through their journey, to help support them, and really answer some of the sorts of questions that we're going to be talking about today. It's still very early days for me. It's just a passion project, really, but I think it's something I feel very strongly about. So really glad to have that opportunity as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all that you're doing, and thank you for stopping by the table that day. Because look at the connection that's been made. And I had shared some of the questions that came in through the registration form with both Jenni and Andy responded and said, "Well, it's good to know other people have the same questions I had or have." And to me, that just really resonates with everything we're trying to do tonight. Is nobody's alone in this, and if you're thinking it, probably somebody else watching this video is experiencing something similar as well. So we'll go ahead, dive on into the first section of questions, and that's kind of just loosely based around recovery and support. But the opening question that I want to toss out there is, what are some things that you wish you would have known at the beginning of your child's journey?
I'll go first then. I think for me, uh, I had no concept. It was just unknown, right? I mean, the whole thing was just very honestly quite confusing initially, and I wish it'd been easier for me to find resources and find information that I could really trust and that was easy to understand. I think it's a better place now than where it was 10 years ago. And people like yourselves have really got a lot to do with that. So that's fantastic that these resources are there. And I think a lot more accessible now. I wish I'd known how long it was going to be and how much pain and effort it was going to be. It's a long journey, but the other thing I did want to say, what I also didn't realize at the beginning is what a wonderful thing it would be too. I mean, I do want to underline that having come out the other end of this several years down the road, um, I look back and think that although it was very painful and very difficult, it's also been amazing in the sense that the bond that I have and that my family has with our child is an incredible thing. And I think we've really grown and learned a lot from each other. So there really is a big positive that can come out of it, right? So I think that's a really good thing to know and understand when you're going into this process.
That's a great point, Andy, because I think, at least for me, and I hear it reflected from a lot of other parents, one of the biggest fears when you step in and you try to help your child in recovery is that you're going to lose that relationship. Sometimes you're using leverage, setting boundaries, and doing things that it feels like, what if I lose my relationship with my child? And I love that you highlighted that there can be positive that comes out of this. We also had that same experience. As hard as it was during the rough parts of it, our family grew and became stronger. And I'm closer to my daughter now than I was before her eating disorder. I would have never guessed that. As far as some of the things that I wish I had known, what comes to mind first for me is I wish I had understood that food was medicine in the beginning. Before I learned a lot about eating disorders, I truly was looking for psychological help only for my daughter, and I didn't realize how important it was for us to get that nutrition in there and that the brain was going to take longer to heal than the body and that I needed to stay the course. And so knowing that sooner would have really helped me. Feast has great resources for that. Feast 30 days. I'm going to do another Feast plug here. It really walks you through all the things that you don't know on the front end of this journey, and that if you knew, it would make your life so much easier. And it didn't exist when I first started this, but it surely would have helped me. It's just 30 email lessons, one a day in your inbox, and you can register for it on the Feast website. The other thing I wish I had understood was, well, two things. One, that recovery isn't linear, that it's not a straight line, step one, step two, step three, that it's like this all over the place journey, and that's completely normal. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. Setbacks are normal. Sometimes relapses are part of recovery. I wish I had understood that a little sooner in the journey. And also, I wish I would have understood that my daughter's behavior because of her illness was her illness and not her not being defiant. Behaviors that we experienced and that I bet some of you all are experiencing are also normal for the course of an eating disorder. So those are, I think, the three main things that I wish I had known early on.
Yeah, talking about that journey of the ups and downs and the twists and turns along the way, how do you as a parent stay motivated and stay engaged in the journey, but how do you also help support your child stay engaged in their healing and motivated through this process and those ups and downs?
Jenny, do you want to start?
Sure. That's a really good question. And I just like so many other things with eating disorders, I don't think there's like one answer to that, or a right or wrong answer. I think it's going to be very dependent on the individual parent and the individual person with the eating disorder. And for me, everything was a trial and error process. I stayed motivated by getting really engaged with people who'd been through this before, a community that knew what they had already gone through and knew how to kind of guide me along the way, whether that's Feast, or another community that you can find of experienced parents. That was really good for me. And also just being really careful to take care of myself and not let myself, go down, along with what my daughter was experiencing. And the word motivation, when I look back at my daughter's journey and her individual motivation, another thing I didn't understand about eating disorders in the beginning was that they're egocentric, and there was something that she identified with the eating disorder that was helpful for her. And so motivation wasn't part of the process in the beginning. She was not even in the pre-contemplation stage of change. So that's where I kind of stepped in and took over a lot of the decisions. And I did it in a loving way. I'm not saying I did it perfectly. Lots of not very good um, attempts until I learned. But her motivation came later on after she had restored her weight and she had a chance to really engage in therapy. That's what our journey was like. It could be different for everyone, but I learned from Feast resources that that motivation piece wasn't necessary in order to start treatment, and that you can always believe in recovery, no matter how many setbacks and how many ups and downs that you have along the way. And I think keeping that in mind for yourself and holding that hope for your child, it goes a long way. Like just believing. I believed she was going to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think similar thing. I think with our son, he was very much really in complete denial. I think that any of this was really going on for quite a long time after it was obvious that there really was a medical problem here. So that side of things is it's very hard to motivate someone when they honestly believe themselves that there's nothing wrong with them. Um, so you kind of just have to ride through that and do what's right for them and take advice from the right people. But again, the good story there, I think, is later on, as you said, I mean, at some point in the process, something kicks in and they do realize that they've been sick. They do realize that they need to recover, and then it all changes. And so don't lose hope over that, I would say. I'm sorry. Don't lose hope over that aspect. That's again, I think that's normal. It's part of the process, and it does change over time. Um, and I think in terms of motivating myself, I just I think one thing that's really important is to understand that your kids are listening to you and they are learning from you, and you are the ones that are ultimately going to help them through this the most, more than anybody else, even if it doesn't feel like that at the time, because they're going to be angry, they're going to be in denial, they're going to be pushing back, and it might seem like they're shutting you out and they're not listening and they don't care, and uh, they might even tell you they hate you or whatever else it is that they're going to say. But underneath all that, there's a real need that they have for you. So that, to me, that was an important thing to keep remembering, that despite what they're saying, that's the illness talking, that's the situation that they're in. But underneath all of that, you're the people that they need, and you're the people that ultimately they're relying on. So that's motivation enough, I think.
Yeah, that's such a great point because I was thinking about my own recovery journey, and it was the people who I needed the most that I was pushing away. They were the ones that I was taking out all the frustration on, but it was because I needed them so much. So yeah, that's a great piece of advice and thing to keep in
Think
mind.
at a subconscious level, you feel safer. You kind of have to hate on someone because you've got all this inside you, and you kind of feel safer doing that in some weird way with the people who are closest to you, because there's a trust there, and so I think that's what manifests there.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. So another question that came in is how do you support your child as you as you transfer down, as you're going from maybe a higher level of care, returning home, possibly returning back to school, kind of getting back into the flow of everyday life. How can you be there to support your child during those transitions in their treatment?
Uh,
That's such,
for
go ahead, Andy.
Oh, sorry. I was just to say for me, like prior to that happening, as he was moving towards a situation where he could come home from inpatient, I think I just went on a, a massive learning spree, but that's just me, and I was just trying to soak up and learn everything, and probably became pretty sort of anxious and over into it. And I think what I learned pretty quickly after he came home is that I really needed to just back off from that a little bit, not try and be an expert, not try and know everything, and be more honest about, hey, I don't have all the questions. I'm not always going to say the right things. I'm not always going to do the right things, but definitely you can rely on the my heart's in the right place and I'm doing what I think is the right thing. Plus, we've still got this whole support system behind us, right? So it's not just you're not coming home to a situation where now suddenly everyone's gone and it's just us in the house trying to work everything out, right? We do still have help. We do still have people around, when we need them. I think that's important for us to remember and important for the kiddos to know that that's still there too.
Yeah, the transitions are hard. And I think just going into it knowing that any transition, even if it means they're stepping down from a higher level of care and they're making so much progress, there might be some bumps there, and that's okay. I did the same thing you did, Andy. I learned as much as I could in between times. And sometimes it gets overwhelming and you do need to step back from that and just take it one step at a time. But I think learning skills for me was really helpful. Feast has a caregiver skills toolkit that I also wish that I had had, but finding some skills so that I could tolerate distress when it came time to support meals, that was really, really helpful for me. I did not have any of those tools to start out with. I was the mom that would want to reassure and, do all of the wrong things that you're not supposed to do with eating disorders. And so learning to validate, learning to distract as much as I could and learning whatever skills I could to regulate my own emotions so I was staying calm for her, even if I didn't feel calm on the inside. But those transitions can be tough. And I think all of us have to give ourselves some grace while we're figuring it out. And not everyone will have a support team in place at every step down level. And we see parents in our support groups who are kind of caught in between, and it is all on them for a little while until the insurance gets worked out or until they, something happens to get that support around them. And in that case, again, I would say, I'm not saying that I knew how to do this at the time, but I know now that getting whatever community around you to support you is really, really helpful.
Yeah. Jason, you're
Jason,
off.
I can't hear you.
I muted myself because I don't know if you can see the little dog in the corner, but he keeps digging. So I didn't want him to interrupt the conversation. But yes, I was just gonna say, Jenny, thank you so much for that. That's a great perspective to keep in mind as you're approaching those transitions. Another question that I wanted to get to is these parents were struggling when it comes to, finding alignment when it comes to expectations and consequences and stuff in the recovery journey. And they're considering doing some sort of written agreement. And we're asking if you had any thoughts on that approach, or maybe perhaps how you could bring those expectations in line, follow through with consequences if needed, navigating and balancing those.
I mean, from my perspective, I think I think that probably depends on the relationship you already have and how you normally go about managing these things. I think there has to be um there have to be some non-negotiables, because at the end of the day, it is an illness. Your kids are actually very sick and you have to do the things that you have to do. So I think finding the right way, whatever that right way is, to say, we can have flexibility on certain things, but there are some things that are just non-negotiable. And that can be hard, and that can feel like in the moment that, okay, this is the thing that my kid's going to hate me for forever because I'm sitting down and forcing them to do something that they really, really, really don't want to do. But again, I mean, with hindsight, I'd say it doesn't work like that. What happens is later on down the road, I think that they're appreciative that you got them through that whole process and they don't remember the little micro moments that happen, even if they feel like huge things at the time. So I think there are certain things where you do have to set boundaries. Um, we had this system which actually the hospital helped us with when we were there and helped prepare us for, which was kind of like um, it was kind of like a levels system. And so at level 3, you had certain privileges that you lost if you went down to level 2, which you lost if you went down to level 1. And everyone was aware that, I think the main thing is setting expectations very clearly up front, being very consistent, having a plan where everyone knows where they stand so that you can say, look, that if you decide to do this, before we even have to talk about it, what the consequences are, right? And those consequences then have to be real and they have to be, in some way meaningful. And so I think you do have to be the bad guy sometimes. But again, the good thing is that that's not going to live on to haunt you for too long. That all gets forgotten about very quickly. I don't know if that
Yeah,
helps
and
the
I
question, but
I think it also depends on kind of where you are in the process and whether or not this would be a good time and an effective way for you to compel treatment or to move forward in recovery, make some progress. The written agreement that we used was more of a relapse prevention agreement when my daughter went to college, but I felt like it was such a great safety net for us. So we didn't use contracts or agreements really toward the beginning of her treatment process, although I think that had I been educated on them, it probably would have been really helpful. But the relapse prevention agreement that we did, we just, framed it as this is for your safety. This is not punishment in any way. But in order for you to be able to stay in college, these are the things that will need to happen. And then you said levels, Andy. It was the same. This was like a green light, yellow light, red light
mhm.
type of format where we talked about everything. Green means everything's going well, no interventions needed. If you get to yellow, then there are some interventions that we're going to put in place here. For my daughter, one of them was you'll stop going to dance. She did a ballet program while she was in college. So if she lost X amount of weight, that was one of the things that had to happen until we got it back up. And then if it got to the red light level and we weren't in a limited period of time, say 2 or 3 weeks, I don't remember the exacts, um, couldn't get her weight back into a range that was safe, then we intervened by going there, eating with her. And at a certain point of time, if we weren't getting everything back where it needed to be, if the eating disorder behaviors hadn't stopped, then we would pull her out of school. And that's exactly what you said, Andy. Like it has to be meaningful and you have to be willing to follow through on it for it to be effective. Um, my daughter was in a good place at the time that we wrote this agreement, and she helped us with, what do you think? What are your triggers? What are the things that you think are warning signs for you? We made sure and incorporated all of that in there. Um, and we did end up getting to the red light. And we did pull her out of college for the last 3 weeks of a semester just because she was in that precarious place. And it was horribly difficult, but that agreement, I think, made it so much easier than if we hadn't had it because we knew exactly what to do. We had everything in place. We knew exactly how medical leave worked. We had people at the college that knew what was going on, and it was absolutely the best thing for her. And I really think it helped her recover from that slip so much faster.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I know how you use the term slip there. Did you happen to get that from Mallory's recent book, or did you just?
I did not, but I just heard about that book yesterday and I can't wait to read it.
Definitely, everybody check that book out. It is a phenomenal book. So I wasn't sure if you were thinking that because it's the perfect word for that when that happens, is it's a slip.
Yeah,
And that was language that I didn't have up until I read this book. So yeah. But I guess to kind of add on to this, one of the other questions that came in is for parents of adult children. So you're kind of talking about that college period there, but I know that parents can still play a role in their adult child's recovery. Do you have any advice for them on how to navigate that time? Any guidance or support tips that you could share for parents who might have adult children who are going through eating disorder treatment or recovery?
Jenny, do you want to?
sure. Um,
Well, I
my
think
my daughter was a young adult. What'd you say, Andy?
I was saying while I think of what I'm going to say.
Of course. Yeah, of course. I really think this is one of the most common questions that we get at Feast, and especially we have a lot of participants in our support groups that come in with young adults, and it does change it a little bit. And that doesn't mean that you don't have leverage, and it doesn't mean that you can't be really instrumental in their treatment and their recovery. Sometimes you have to look at it a little bit differently. It just depends on how financially dependent they are on you and how involved you still are in their lives. And we have an amazing family guide. Here I go again, Jason, with a plug. An amazing leverage family guide that I would love for any of you who are dealing with this situation to look at on the Feast website. It really tells you how to be compassionate in creating limits. And I love the way it's framed because it's so positive. It frames it as this is something that gives them something to work toward. And so you're saying, if this is going to happen, then this will have to happen. So it's very, very helpful, and you can use any kind of leverage that you have, even your relationship if you don't have any financial leverage. Um, but it can be even with simple things like if you want us to pay for college, you will engage in treatment, something like that. And then you put all of that into place, and it's a lot easier said than done. But I think the main thing is just never withdrawing your love and never withdrawing your support, your emotional support. You can follow through on boundaries without ever, ever removing the compassion and the love and the support.
Yeah, 100%. Just continuing to be there and continuing to try and be as involved as they need you to be, really. And again, my personal experience has been, so my son's 22 now. He got delayed because of hospital, and then afterwards he was out of school for a while, and so he's now actually just now going through trying to transfer into college, and that's been a whole journey in itself because it's been very, very a non-traditional route that he's going through, and obviously he's going in, he's going to be older than the other kids who are there. Um, but at the same time, I mean, he's matured a lot. He's grown up a lot, and I think in some ways that makes it easier because we don't I don't really ever feel like it's anything adversarial with him at this point. It's more that he knows that he's still going to need help and support. He knows that we're there for him, and I think he's very happy and open to, okay, how do we make this work? What are the right things to be doing here, rather than really in any way pushing back and fighting that. So in that sense, that maturity that he has because of his age makes it quite a bit easier than it was 10 years ago, when he was just pushing back on everything. So
All right, so I'm going to shift gears here just a little bit now and kind of move into creating a supportive environment. So, some questions that we received around that. The first question that I wanted to ask is, how did your child's eating disorder recovery change the household, especially dynamics when it comes to like the relationships in the household or the views around body, diet, exercise, those things. We know that eating disorders impact beyond just the individual. It impacts the entire family. It impacts the entire household. So how does your house look different now? What's changed? How have the family dynamics been impacted?
Do you want me to go? I think for us, it changed tremendously, but I think I think again initially we were kind of um really not giving out. I like what you said earlier, Jenny, about giving yourself grace. This is an area where you really need to give yourself grace, right? So when we first started learning about this, I think we became hyper vigilant and tried to police everything we were saying and everything we were doing and constantly overthinking, did we say the right thing? Did we do the right thing? All that sort of stuff. And I think that in the end that was really just creating a lot of stress and tension. Um, and so I think finding, yeah, having given yourself enough grace that you could find a place where you could be yourselves, you can try and create an environment that is still as close to normal as it could possibly be, while still having the boundaries that you do need, right? So obviously we're not gonna be going around looking at labels and counting calories and talking about all this sort of stuff. But at the same time, if someone slips up and says something that, you know, with hindsight, I wish I hadn't said that, that was kind of not the right thing to say, don't beat yourself up too much about it. You know, don't make it a big deal for yourself. Don't make it a big deal for the kid. Don't dwell on it, make it an issue. Don't bring too much attention to it. Just kind of move on and don't worry about it too much. I mean, I think that was a big thing for us to learn because then we got back into a more normal day-to-day existence whilst, you know, still having these changes around. Having said that, I mean, I was, and I think this, you know, this might play into the situation to some degree. I was very much a I was going to the gym a lot. I was counting calories myself. I was very much talking about diet and proteins and all this sort of stuff leading up to this. So and so the other thing I'd say is, well, you know, we I had to change my behavior in that sense to, you know, to not be focused on that stuff. Um, but also not to I felt very guilty about it. And I think don't don't beat yourself up too much about that sort of stuff. I mean, I think now, um, did it play into it? Sure, I'm sure it probably did play into things at that time, but it certainly wasn't what caused it. It certainly wasn't my fault. But at the same time, you know, I just had to change my behavior around that a little bit and just take the focus of it and off of it and not make it a central thing to what I might sit down and talk about and obsess over myself, right? So I think it's just finding a sensible level there without becoming too obsessed with what the right thing to say or do is in a particular moment. I don't know if as experts you'd agree with that at all, but that's my kind of what I think I learned from it.
No, I mean, I completely agree. There's not really even really a right or wrong thing to say. I mean, I think that's also a really common question. Like, I keep saying the wrong thing, and I think we're judging that it's the wrong thing based on our child's reaction. But the eating disorder is going to protest if we are requiring uh, them to stop eating disorder behaviors, if we're requiring them to stop restricting, to start eating more. And so it's going to feel like you're always saying the wrong thing. And so, yeah, giving yourself grace, like you said, Andy, is a great idea. And as far as that's also easier said than done. But as far as our family dynamics, I think it was kind of an evolution. In the beginning, it was like the bottom of our world had dropped out. It was went from what I would have considered like a pretty calm household to we're in kind of an urgent situation here pretty much around the clock. Every time it was mealtime or snack time, there was going to be some distress for my daughter and for all of us who were witnessing how hard it was for her. And, for my other two kids, one was her older sister, one her younger brother. Um, it definitely impacted them. Jason, you said it doesn't just impact one person, it's the whole family. It impacted them in different ways. And we kind of figured out how to work with that. And one thing that I'll tell anyone who does have siblings of the person with eating disorder is, we offered them to get their own support and help if they wanted to go to therapy, and watched, them fairly closely to make sure they were okay as much as we could. And it was hard. It was really hard. And I, had been known to work out quite a bit too, Andy, and sometimes watch what I was eating. I definitely didn't talk about bodies or appearances or anything like that, but I definitely was health conscious. And I think one really positive thing that came out of this for me as I'm aging, and I know now I am not going to be like I was when I was 25. I have so much more acceptance around everything now. So it's been a real gift for me, um, seeing my daughter go through this and realizing, I understand now what's important, and that's not what's important, Um, the person is what's important. So yeah, it was very freeing, but it was a journey to get there. It was very difficult to navigate at first. And then the more we learned and the more experience we got, everyone now is doing well, and all my kids are really close to each other. Um, and we're really lucky, that the family unit is intact.
And your point about siblings is super important. So I've got uh, he's got a younger brother, 6, 7 years younger. So it was very important that I say remembered. I don't really mean remembered. It's not like you're ever going to forget about your other kid, but just very consciously making time when you've got this one child that's demanding all your time and all your attention and is creating not they're not creating it, the illness is creating it, but that there's an environment being created around what's going on. You've got to find time to take the other children out of that situation and spend good quality time with them and make sure that they don't just get, yeah, make sure they're not feeling like they're getting left behind or forgotten about. The last thing you want, obviously you don't want that anyway, but the last thing you want is them equating that environment with their ability to get attention, because then you're just going to have a whole nother problem to deal with. So I think it's very important.
That's another reason I love the sibling support groups. There isn't a whole lot of support out there for siblings. So if you have siblings who are ages 13 and up, I mean, all the way through adulthood, they are more than welcome to join one of the sibling support groups. It's a really unique space. It's siblings who have been through this, and they're using their lived experience to support others through it. And the connections that the siblings make with each other in that group, I know, just from hearing the sibling support group leaders talk about it, that a lot of times they feel like that's really the first person, the other siblings that they meet in this group that understood what they were going through and how hard it was, and that they weren't really sure what their role was. They weren't really sure how they were supposed to manage this or handle this. And it was good to just be in a community of people who got it.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but like fantastic things from, well, from all of our support groups, but especially the sibling support group and the sibling support group leaders. So it's a tremendous resource, and it's overlooked. It's overlooked just the impact that it does have on siblings and the entire family. So now we'll kind of move on into really the subject that's front of mind for everybody right now, back to school time. It's that time of year, and like I mentioned at the top, that can be a really difficult transition. So, do you have any tips or guidance, support for parents when it comes to working with schools and collaborating with your child's teachers or educators, or if they're going off to college with student wellness departments or counseling departments? How do you navigate that time of going back to school while in recovery?
Jenny, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. Oh, I'm remembering back to the very beginning and how hard this was because of the decisions as a parent that you are having to make when you're not really even sure what this illness is yet, and you don't want to underreact, you don't want to overreact. There are all the concerns about, my child is on this trajectory. If I pull them out of school or keep them from starting school, and this is exactly the timing it was for my daughter, at the beginning of her sophomore year in high school, we were deciding should she even go back to school or not. And most of these kids are very high achieving kids. They're really involved in everything that they do. And for us, it felt excruciating to say you're not going to be able to go to school, even though that was the decision we made. She wasn't in a medical condition to go to school. Then you're also not going to be able to dance. You will not be able to do any ballet. Felt like the major double whammy. And I had to really work on my own feelings about that and just put recovery first. And it was a learning curve, having to go through the homebound school program, and it will depend on the school that you're working with. Our school was so helpful and supportive. I mean, I went and talked to the counselor and to the vice principal, and they got me in touch with the homebound school program, who contacted all of her teachers. And we did the beginning of her sophomore year at home. I did not have to do a 504 plan because they were willing to help us with all of that. And when she went back to school later on that year, they also accommodated us in ways that I will be forever grateful. Not all schools are that cooperative, but I mean, a 504 plan is a great thing to do if you're in a public school and your child's medical condition, the eating disorder, is keeping them from being able to really learn. If it's interfering with their ability to learn, then you can get some accommodations, things like exemption from PE, or someone supervising their lunch every day, or maybe them being able to come out to the car and eat lunch with you. Whatever it is that you need to support them and during that transition back. But not any easy decisions. And, maybe you start school and then you pull them out because they're not doing well with that. And I think for me, what I learned is go ahead and do the trial and error. I mean, all you can do is try and see if it's working. And as soon as it's not working, go ahead and go with plan B. You might get all the way to plan Z, but you're going to keep moving forward with each step, with each part of it. You learn so much and you see what's going to work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with the story, in the we did, it was pretty clear to us that he wasn't going to be able to go back to school immediately. So um, we had to keep him back, and that was kind of devastating for him because he's a real planner, and he had his life planned out and everything was mapped out, and he knew what college he was going to go to and what he was going to do next, and yada yada yada, and all of that immediately was defunct. None of that, it was obvious that none of that was going to happen the way that he wanted it to, the way that he'd planned things out in his mind. And that was devastating for him at the time. So it was a very difficult decision to do that. But I think we all agree at this point that it's what he needed. We did try. He did go back to school for a little while, and it was really not a good situation. Well, unfortunately, we weren't in such a positive situation, and we did have a 504 in place. I think it's worth saying that everyone should know that, legally there are requirements there for the school. So if you are in an environment where the school is not particularly open to talking about this and doing certain things, you can get some help to understand what they have to do and the things that they have to put in place to help. Um, but in the end, I mean, they did. I guess I would say they did the sort of minimum that they had to do. But he did have some help while he was there, but it really wasn't working out. So we pulled him out, and it was the right thing to do. It's what he needed at the time. And again, I mean, trying to put a positive spin on it now, okay, so his life changed at that point, and his plans kind of changed very radically, but now he's very comfortable with where he is, and he's got a new plan, and now he's back on track, and he's feeling good about everything. So it's not ideal, it's not what he would have wanted, but our lives rarely go exact way that we think they're going to go anyway, and you just have to roll with the punches sometimes. And I think that's a good life lesson anyway. The key thing is, I think he's an incredibly resilient person now. And I think that's come from this process. And so I think one of the real positives that's come out of this process is that he's been forced to, find a non-traditional route to do a lot of these things. And that's built a lot of grit and resilience in him. So I know he's going to be very successful because of that resilience that I don't think he would have otherwise had. So there really is a positive that can come out of these things. But going back to the actual question, I think for people going back to school, I would say be very proactive. I mean, I know school's already back started now, but I would say, don't deal with the situations as they spring up. Try and think through, okay, what am I going to need to get in place here? What is going to be an issue? Who would be the right people for me to talk to about that? I think, like you say, if you can get in front of the leadership at the school, that would be great. You really need to be talking to the nurse. You need to be talking to the counselors for the child so that they're aware. And I think around sort of like meal times, it's really important to have those conversations before they just happen and become a problem, right? So I think they did accommodate him eating in the nurse's office instead of having to eat in a public space. And for some kids, that's great. They would prefer that. Some kids probably would prefer not to do that, and they would rather sit with their friends and everything. And I think my only advice in that scenario would be that if that's the situation, then talk to your kids openly about what they're comfortable with, and try and give them a way to do whatever it is they've got to do as discreetly as you can. Like if they want to sit and eat with their kids, but you need them to take pictures of their food or whatever, you just make sure that they're aware that that's going to be what they're going to have to do, and help them find a discreet way to do that. And again, I would say this is where those non-negotiables come in, because what you can't do is say, okay, well, I feel sorry for you. I don't want to make you have to sit in a nurse's office away from your friends. And I know you're uncomfortable, like doing all this stuff in front of your friends, therefore don't worry about it, because that's then the perfect opportunity for the illness to take over and say, right, okay, this is my chance to not eat when I should be eating and not do the things that I need to be doing. So I think you do have to make sure those non-negotiables are still being taken care of one way or another, even if it's hard to do.
Yeah, even if it's hard to do. And that leads perfectly into the next question that I was going to ask, and it's around self-care. So, before we get started with this, if anybody who's watching right now has any questions, definitely feel free to put them in the Q&A section. We'll have a few minutes here to answer a couple of them, hopefully. But Jenni and Andy, I want to ask you both, what did you do in terms of self-care for yourself? Because you've got to do some of those tough things, and it can be really difficult at times. But it's so important that you take care of yourself. I always think of what they tell you on an airplane, how you need to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you put it on your child. What self-care tips would you be able to share with people who might be watching this?
Don't
I just have to react to the oxygen mask thing really quick. That at the very beginning of this, several people said that to me, and I had this kind of like cringe reaction, and I was like, "You do not understand what I'm dealing with here. It's impossible for me to do that." So if anyone out there is feeling like that applies to everybody except for me, I can just tell you from my own experience that get ahead of it if you can, and make sure that you don't, you know, get really sick or get really stressed out and not be able to be there to support your child. So yeah, my advice there, Jason, would be to do something really small at the beginning if it feels impossible. And I created this term, my minimum baseline self-care. I don't know if that term was already out there, but I was like, what is realistic for me this week? I can do 10 minutes of something that I enjoy 3 times this week, and I wrote it into my calendar. I basically had to practice doing it. It felt very unnatural, but it helped me so much. And for me, my main go-to was to walk outside of the house and get outside. Whether I was walking around or I was just looking around. 10 minutes of being outside and getting grounded, and kind of just getting out of that really, really stressful environment. And any chance I got, I just did very simply just wrote in a journal, and I just kind of poured all of my feelings out into my journal. So going outside and writing in my journal, it didn't take a whole lot of time, but I feel like those two things really, really helped me process a lot and stay in the present instead of staying in fight or flight, because you can really get stuck in fight or flight when you're in this situation caring for your child around the clock and you're really worried about them. But it's not easy to do. I don't think self-care is easy. Like you said, it's hard, but it is extremely important.
Absolutely. I would say, A, if you have the means or the ability through your insurance or whatever, um, I would say get help, like go to counseling, go to therapy if if you feel like it would help. I would say I did, and it was the best thing I ever did. I think it helped me tremendously to do that. I think it would have been very difficult, very hard on us all, if I hadn't, because I was really struggling with this in the beginning, and I think it really helped me personally, but I think it also helped the whole of my family that I went and got that help, right? So if you have the means, I would say that can be very important. And I would say recruit help too. I mean, if you from wherever you can get it, like not, I know not everybody has a huge support system around them. I wasn't born here. I don't have a lot of family around me here. My wife's from overseas as well, so we don't have a lot of immediate family around us all the time. But we were able to get support and help where we could get it. And they are willing to help as well if if you're willing to reach out and ask. So I think don't be afraid of asking for help and support from wherever you need it. And also help to help them give you the right sort of help as well. And what I mean by that is I gathered some stuff together, and I remember creating a little set of links and an email and sending it out and having a big long chat with my dad and saying, look, this is what's going on. I want you to go and read these 3 or 4 things because it's really going to help you understand the situation. And that was tremendously helpful because people don't understand, and they don't understand some of these things, and you don't want to end up in a situation where you're trying to get help from someone who is actually unintentionally being unhelpful, right? Uh,
Mhm.
so I think if you can help them find out more and make it easy for them to understand what your kid's going through, what you guys are going through, that's gonna make it easier for you to recruit help as well.
All right, awesome. And I think that's a perfect kind of stopping point. This hour went by really quick. First of all, I feel like we could continue to answer questions and have this conversation. Jenny and Andy, do either one of you have anything else you'd like to share before we close out tonight?
Just
I would,
very much for
oh, go,
having me. Yeah, it was awesome that you invited me along. I'm glad. I hope something I said made sense and helped somebody in some way, but it was great to be a part of it, whatever. So yeah.
yeah. And I was just going to say for anyone who's having a really hard time right now, it's a journey and it will get better. And I just hope you feel supported and that you find community so you won't feel alone. You aren't alone, even though it feels very isolating at times when you're caring for a child with an eating disorder, and just always hold hope for a complete recovery. All eating disorders are treatable and a full recovery is possible was, something that I just kept as something that I could go to as a thought that I wanted to have. A lot of the negative thoughts are going to come in too, but just, really, really believing that your loved one is going to be okay, I think goes a long way when it gets hard.
All right. Well, Jenni, Andy, it has been an absolute pleasure to share this space with you tonight and to be in community with all of you. Thank you, everyone, for attending and for watching. This is the first of three peer panels that we're going to do throughout the next month. Next week, we're going to be focusing in on educators. So if you know of any of those schools or educators where maybe they have some questions around eating disorders, definitely send them our way. And then in a couple weeks, we'll also be doing one of these for students. So if your child or a student that you know could benefit, definitely invite them. We're looking forward to having several more community Q&As throughout the month. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you have a great rest of your day, wherever you're at, whenever you're watching this, and take care. Thanks.
Thank you.